I had a house fire in 8th grade. My mom burned our house down. We went to go stay with my stepdad's boss. Seeing that neighborhood, it was kind of like this light bulb that went off. This guy is wealthy. You think you have time, you actually don't. You have to be working on yourself a decade at least before you even get the opportunity to step in front of the guy that can really change your life. Release the thought of what the people in your Facebook are gonna say. You'll find the people that love you for exactly who you are. I believe that collaboration is the #1 growth hack. Common sense doesn't sell. Things that are going to trigger people seems to sell.
Justin, you grew up in a pre-religious environment. What was that like?
Probably about the same as it was like growing up in Salt Lake or in Utah. I have nothing against religion. I think if it weren't for religion, society would not be what it is today. Where I tend to disagree is telling young children that they're going to burn in hell over things that are most often happening to them naturally. So again, I cannot emphasize enough how much I do support religion where it fits naturally. But I think when you start indoctrinating children or giving them the fear of death eternally in fire, that it is a bit of a turnoff to me.
Did that shape your beliefs around a lot of the things you think today? So meaning,
I don't think so.
No.
I don't think so. Because my decision is going to come from objective truth because I'm an adult now, right? So any feelings that I have towards religion for myself, whether it's true or whether it helps society, hurts society, or whether it's not true, is generally coming from my own looking for myself. And I think that anybody who wants to figure out anything in their life, whether it's religion or the best way to go about building a business, let's say, they're going to need to look for themselves. Because if they can't look for themselves and have that conviction in their own heart, then they're really just doing it for other people.
So kind of find that answer internally.
Right. And you have to do that by looking and confronting it, even if it's scary.
How did you go about doing that? I'm sure there's, at what age did you get to that conclusion, I guess I could say? And then how did you go about doing that?
I think I had feelings towards how I currently feel about it after going through stints of deeply, deeply looking for it and not finding satisfactory answers. A lot of those conversations I've had, and I bet you've had some conversations like this, where it's you're not trying to disprove it. You're openly trying to have a conversation that ends with, well, you just have to have faith. And I'm such a literalist that that's always been a struggle for me. So it's actually put me on a journey, I would even say now, to try to find something that I can tie that belief to that makes sense to me logically. And I think that's probably my biggest struggle on that subject.
Yeah, I think for me, when I was younger, I asked about 10 pastors what they thought, and they all gave different answers. And that I'm so open-minded that the more answers I got, the more confused I got. Because I was like, well, if you guys are all reading the same things or around the same area, why do you guys all disagree? And then it made it almost more confusing for me. And I think to your point, something you said that is really good for the listeners is at some point, I think you do have to look for yourself, because the more you ask other people, it almost causes more confusion. Because you're trying to justify where they're coming from. Like, well, yeah, he said that, and that's a good point.
Well, that's because they're giving you their translation. However, what other book do we accept that from? What other book can literally tell you the definition of something, and then we accept you taking the definition and saying, oh, but it actually meant this, or the message should be put in this light? I can't think of another book that whether it's Old or New Testament, where it's not being in some way almost translated to what God meant or what this particular individual believes that God meant. And if you know one, please tell me. But if you open Webster's dictionary right now and you look up the word that you're looking for, it's going to give you a definition. It might give you a couple of other uses or how that word could be, but it's going to be right there in the text. And I think the Bible's interesting in that way, because if you look at people that are preachers or even Jordan Peterson, they'll talk about it very metaphorically, and they'll talk about what those stories meant. At this point, I am in kind of the realm of feeling like they're fables that are for the best good for the world. I think overarchingly they can be. until they cause war, until they make a child traumatized in some sense. I mean, do you ever remember being a young man and being told something was going to happen to you if you didn't act a certain way?
Yeah, no, I
and
do.
feeling the fear of eternal fire?
Yeah, I think,
I know you guys have three heavens, yeah?
yeah. Yeah.
Right.
So, I mean, I was raised LDS from Mormon, and I think the hardest thing for me was just as I got older, it's a lot of your beliefs obviously are coming from your parents and how you're raised. And so I got to a point in my life where I had to really start thinking, is this something I believe or is this something my parents believe? Right. And then do I want to live the rest of my life doing something that maybe I don't feel comfortable doing or not? And I think that's the hard part, because depending on how you're raised and how your parents think or your society or environment or your neighborhood, whatever, I think that's what makes it tough. How do you practice now, if at all?
So I think you have to, I just want to add on to something you just said.
Sure.
How you should get to any decision in a healthy way, I believe, is understand first that you do have a bias. So as an adult, I have a bit more of a bias towards those aren't actual stories. I do believe that Jesus was a real man, but there's some things in the Bible, like a virgin having a baby. Or let's say a man that is hundreds of years old, able to wrangle up every animal on the planet, build a boat large enough to help, like to sustain it, and then farm at a level to be able to feed those animals for a period of time. That, to me, that sounds like a fable, because those miracles only happened 2,000 years ago. Where are these miracles now? So there's that. So I have that bias, right? So the first thing I do when I have any bias is go try to listen to the other side. If you don't like a presidential candidate, I think it's very healthy to go listen to someone who does not agree with you and you're biased, so you can listen for anything that you can find truth in. And then once you've done that, I think it makes a lot of sense to look at your life in the world that is literally in front of you and objectively observe the truth and reality. And that way you can confront your bias and what you've seen in your own life. And I think if you can do that, you can get to a healthy decision that makes sense. And some people, I think, I would even argue, will stay in religion not because they believe it, but because it makes them feel a part of something, or they think it's the best thing for their life or even their business, I hate to say. And one of the most annoying things that I think I see out there is someone that I think is grifting and making money off of God. And the reason that really, really bothers me is because I know that there are Christians out there that genuinely believe what's in the Bible. And so you have people that are out there acting a certain way, saying a certain set of things, when they themselves might not even believe those stories are true. And so, and kind of admit to it or dance around the subject of whether it's true or not. And I think grifting off of Jesus particularly and Christianity particularly and profiting from it at a high level while you wear a mask is the most disgusting thing you could ever do. Just because I know too many good Christians that actually believe it. And funny enough, it's those Christians that don't have to say it, because the love that they have through God is coming off of them in such a way that I can feel it. And so when I see someone openly pitching God, I immediately distrust them and know that if they really loved God, that it would come off of them in a different way. And for that reason, I even sometimes distance myself from people that are so religious that they lead with it.
What would you label yourself as at this point? Like, would you say agnostic, atheist?
I would say an agnostic that's openly looking for a way to believe. I watch so many arguments on both sides. I watch a lot of Christian channels looking for that one thing. I'm looking for that blind spot. I can't find it. I would love to be wrong about that.
Was there anything in particular that happened growing up that kind of pushed you that direction? Like for me, for example, I grew up very, super religious and strict. And so I think sometimes if you're really pushed this way, you'll kind of rebound the other way? There's nothing in particular that happened to you?
No, I wouldn't say there's anything that pushed me away. I mean, I've handed out sacrament meeting. I've also watched people speak in tongues and fall on the floor.
Yeah.
But as an adult, you look back and you're like, wait a second, I knew that individual. What was his life like? It's like so for me, it's, if I think about my childhood, it's, yeah, there were probably too many altar calls, and maybe there was a little bit of almost like the Santa Claus version of manipulating a kid, like you better act like this, but instead of Christmas presents, like you're gonna burn eternally in hell. I think that's a bullshit thing to tell a 6-year-old. You know what I'm saying? But looking back at those people that were falling all over the floor, some of these people, their lives were wrecks. And it's just, that's what I've seen in my life. And so I generally like to take advice from people I'd like to be like. And outside of that, it's the objective truth part that I struggle the most with.
What did you think you were going to do when you grew up? Did you think you were going to be doing anything what you're doing now? Because
No.
I think your trajectory is very different.
How so?
Just the way I watched, you grew up in kind of, I would say, a conservative environment. You went on to play football. You're in Louisiana. Then you got into construction. And then a few years ago, you just got into social media, really. I mean, it seems new, right? And so...
It's very new.
Right. So, what did you think we were going to grow up? Because I thought I was going to play in the NFL, right? That's what I thought.
Right.
And I played football like you, et cetera. Did you think you were going to go down this path or have any idea?
So I had a couple early passions. One of them was to be a country music singer.
Oh, no.
Yeah. When I was a kid in the 90s, hell yeah. So it was that, and I remember seeing a man in a suit one day, and I said, I'm going to be a businessman. Okay. Outside of that, an architect or an oceanographer, something I was very interested in, and I actually find myself quite interested in now. Maybe in the last 20 years of my life, when I've accrued enough money, I'd really like to help out in any discovery type area, whether that's uncovering the cities that seem to be under Antarctica, understanding more about the world while we're flying through space on a rock. Maybe that's Jesus. Maybe it is. But even if it is Jesus, I think the likelihood of us being the only life in civilization is mathematically impossible. And so I'm deeply interested in space and anything exploratory to get to truth.
That's interesting.
Yeah. And probably not the answer you expected.
No, I wouldn't picture you interested. I mean, you've always come off to me as very curious, but that in particular is very interesting to me, that you'd be curious in that.
Very much so.
You got to play, obviously, some Division I football at ULM. When you did that, were you the type of guy who wanted to go to the pros or thought you were going to go to the pros, or were you there and it's like, hey, this is a stepping stone to get to the next place I want to go to?
So I had already won. The reason I played football in college and not baseball, or I quit playing basketball. I was playing football, baseball, and basketball until I was a sophomore.
Right, you're doing 3 sports.
I was playing 3 sports. And I was lettering.
Yeah.
But I knew that if I played football, I could leave my town. I could get out of there. I wouldn't end up working in the plants. And so it was like my October Skies, like the movie October Skies, where he doesn't want to work in the coal mine. I knew it was my ticket out. I wasn't that kid. I remember, you know how you'd always have those guys on your high school team and they were seniors? And they're just nerds, and they were just so. And it was the last game in your locker room, and they're like crying when they're taking their pads off. I'm sitting there, and I'm like, like it was transactional for me at that time. It wasn't the love of the game. It was. I've always been working on the man I want to become, and I knew that if I got a scholarship, I'd get the fuck out that town. And I thought that was the most healthy thing for me. I thought it was the best move for me. You understand? I make this decision in 2003. I graduate in 2005. YouTube is not what YouTube is now. Oh. If I would have been in high school when YouTube was a real thing, I'd have skipped college.
I mean, you were even before me, so even for me, it wasn't really a thing quite yet. At least
No,
from what I remember,
it was the pinnacle of what a young man could do in my mind. You know, and I think a lot of young men's minds across Louisiana, Texas, Mississippi, Florida, all across America. I think that sports are actually going to take a decline over the next 10 or 20 years.
Interesting.
Because I think that when you look at, I know when they ask high schoolers what they want to be, number one is an influencer. So some of these talented athletes might take whatever ambition they have towards being or having some certain type of status at school. It could go from a Letterman jacket to a legitimate platform. depending. And I think that's probably happening right now. And that's aside from the fact where I think it's a good idea or a bad idea. I do think it's going to happen.
After football in college, you got into construction. And this was really kind of the first step into business. What made you go into construction and not a different arena? Was there anything that just lined up for you or in particular?
Construction, for me, I always say the only way we knew how to make doctor money was in boots. It was the consciousness that I had in South Louisiana. It was nothing more than that. I didn't know another way to do very, very well.
Was that something you saw there? So guys in construction did do well?
I had a house fire in 8th grade. My mom burned our house down. That's what happened. We had 2 house fires, the same property. Crazy. And I'll tell you this. We went to go stay with my stepdad's boss, and he worked for a metal building company. Seeing that neighborhood, being in that house, it was kind of like this light bulb that went off, and this guy is wealthy. And so that was the exposure I had to it. On top of that, anybody that had a good job in our neighborhood would generally end up having a new truck at some point, which was a major status symbol in a neighborhood that I had. Even if it was a rack and a load, it meant he was a foreman at least. Even if it was a company truck. I remember my stepdad got a company truck one time, and it was a F-350. And it had a big rack on it, but it was new. And it just said a lot to the rest of the neighborhood about his ability to get a good job. Like, it was very clear that if he had a company truck, he had a salary that went with it. It was a good thing. So, yeah, that's what I'd say about construction.
How do you typically get leads in that type of business? A lot of the listeners here, they're either trying to start businesses or have businesses. In that type of industry, I'm assuming it's a little bit more old-fashioned. How do you go about getting leads or getting customers in that type of industry?
So in commercial, you can join things like Plan Hub, I Square Foot, Dodge Report. You can get the report. You know what bids are coming. From there, you have to get really granular about either getting in touch with the architect or pulling the pre-job walk form to find out what all contractors are bidding the project. There might be 10 contractors bidding the project, general contractors, right? But if only 3 invite you, you're wasting the opportunity to bid the other 7. So I was very adamant about being in touch with people before the project bid, even reaching out to them and clarifying my scope just to build rapport with them. And then once the bid went out, I would be able to find out who won and follow up with not only the guy that won, but everybody that built the project so they could get comfortable. I could know where my numbers came in against everyone else. I could take conversations that I had with, let's say, 10 contractors about my number and why we won or did not win, and kind of create a Venn diagram to see who was just trying to get me to lower my bid or if my bid was actually in the right place. And I think doing that follow-up process with general contractors when you want to become a commercial sub is something really, really good to do, especially in the beginning while you're building trust and rapport, because you have to remember, if they choose to use you, if they choose to issue you a contract, particularly in my situation where I'm the critical path, before that building is put up and there's a roof on it, the framers can't start. You know, they can rough in plumbing and electrical through the slab, but really it's on me once they turn it over to us. And there's got to be a certain level of trust there. And they have to know that you have the ability to not only cash flow the project, but man it, hit the schedule, quality, safety, production. And so you have to be in communication in a way that creates that comfort level for them to give you a shot in the first place. And so making sure you're bidding everybody, following up on your bid, talking to them through the bid process to really clearly define the scope that they're looking for is very, very important in the beginning.
Who actually owns those projects typically? Is it another business, or is it like the local city government, or who's usually are you bidding against? Does that make sense?
So it depends. So if it's a municipal project, it might be city or government. That might make it a prevailing wage job. But if it's, let's just say it's an investor who wants to build a very large warehouse, he'll get in touch with the architect. The architect will say, well, I trust these 5 to 10 general contractors. We'll let them bid it. Those contractors will invite me, and I'll bid my scope of work, which is always Division 13, pre-engineered metal buildings.
What's some of the most common challenges your team encounters on a day-to-day basis in that type of industry?
You understand, like, to build something, it's very difficult because you're going against the weather. You have the men, which I do think is the largest variable. You have the other contractors. You have the material coming to site, which means you have supply chain. You have their production and fabrication, in my case. You have to make sure that you line the schedule up in a way that when you do a roof startup that you might get the inspector to come out, or you schedule the inspector to come out after so you can have those warranty papers given on the building. You have to make sure that you're getting the right kind of contracts, that the retainage is not out of control and your payment terms are right, and your schedule of values that you submit to the contractor is set up in a way that you can float the project with as little bank money as possible. The cost of money is really important in construction. The longer it takes, the more that cost of money gets into the project, which is a variable cost based off a schedule that you have to hit. There's safety. Again, with the men, safety, 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 safety. They don't want to hear it. They don't want to hear safety in systems. They don't want to hear, read the drawings exactly. Let's go over the set of plans. Oh, I've been putting up buildings for 25 years. Yeah, but the last building you put up was a new core, and this is a Varco Pruden building, and that's Spanish and that's Portuguese. They might be cousins, but if you don't pay attention to every little detail in construction, and that guy makes that same mistake on a 3-inch piece of mastic, but he does it for 200 feet down the building, then we're in big trouble. Because what seems like such a small thing in the drawings is not a small thing when it comes to the manufacturer stamping that you put that roof on correctly and them warranting the building, which would create a very, very large issue. And that's when you get into insurance situations and having to rip roofs off that could cost hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not millions of dollars. And so attention to detail is very important. When you have the variable of the men, the heat, the supply chain, the materials, it becomes this orchestrated chaos that you have to have benchmarks for and systems for to make sure that you don't make mistakes that'll cost you later.
You're obviously pretty heavy on social media. Whenever I check it, there's always someone always has something to say about whatever you said.
Yeah.
And so you have what some would deem controversial views. What would you say some of the most controversial views you have, and or if whatever it is, what made you feel that specific way about that view?
Give me one.
The one recently, just because of the political election, is like, I mean, I'll see you post something about that, and it's like everyone's got something to say, but I don't know if that's really super controversial.
Are you talking about Trump?
Yeah. Like if you post something, but that's more recent.
I think that's a layup to create people to get upset. Like, that's an obvious one. Like, this whole thing is so heated, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's an easy way to get people's attention. I wish it was always like that.
Is there any that sticks out that like you really believe in that people seem to always have an issue with, where you're like, I don't really understand why?
Probably the cooking thing.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Did you say something about cooking?
Yeah, I went on this big rant about how cooking's bullshit, and I have to go downstairs, and this is where it really pissed people off, I think. But I was kind of trolling. I'm like, yeah, I got to get in the G-Wagon, go downstairs to valet, get in the car, drive to Publix, get the stuff.
That's a lot of time, though.
And I go through this whole thing where I'm like, now I'm washing dishes. Like, oh, I'm washing. Yeah, bro, it really pissed some people off. And so, I don't care. But at the same time, if I needed to go to the grocery store today for some reason, I'm not above stopping and going in. That's for sure. I think a lot of times, like, you have to say things that are going to be polarizing and engage people and create emotion or even trigger people. And if you can accept it and know that once you build a platform, you can sneak in those little nuggets of, hey, man, but this is how the world actually works. If you need to go to the grocery store right now because you're 20 and you can't afford anything else, it makes sense.
Right. Like they always want to pick that one thing in their situation to disprove your point. But then it would make almost content a nightmare, because every single video would be like, oh, but if this and this, and then it's like not even
It'd be boring.
Yeah.
It'd be boring
at that point.
Yeah. And so if they need a bad guy, man, I'm your huckleberry, but in regards to like common sense doesn't sell, really. Not common sense alone. It's like common sense plus a tad of being offensive seems to sell. And it's a shame, but I do think it's human nature. And so you have to play the game to some degree.
You always, ever since I met you, I mean, honestly, ever since I've seen you online at all, you always dress really nice, right? You're probably one of the best, dressed guys I've ever met. Do you just enjoy it, or was there something that happened as you were growing up where you just felt, hey, I think I should dress this way for X, Y, Z reason?
I've always been that way. Yeah. Even when I was a small boy.
You got pictures like just always.
It's not that I was wearing suits.
Yeah.
But I would get compliments in college. They'll be like, "You're wearing your football sweats, but it looks like you got ready for an hour." And that wasn't true, but I am very intentional about how things fit me or what I wear, etc. I just recently had my shoulder replaced, so I've been wearing sweats a lot. Yeah, surgery number 6.
What happened? 6 surgeries?
Yeah, I tore my labrum. We were playing A&M. It was a whole deal. Like,
I've had multiple labrum surgeries, but 6 is a lot. I've had 2 on each shoulder, but 6 is a lot, man.
It's a lot. Yeah, wow. It's a lot. And so I've always paid a lot of attention to my appearance, and whatever style I had at said time, I did put a lot of thought into it. At this point in my life and my career, and I've always loved suits, I just really like wearing suits. Do I think I can get it done in a black t-shirt? I do. But a lot of times it's that uniform or that thing that you put on that embodies who you want to become. So I think that's very important. I notice sometimes I'll throw a curveball on a podcast and I'll wear like a flannel. And the poor guy that interviews me wore a suit just because he thought I was going to do it. And I'm like, oh no, man. And I'll actually feel guilty because I genuinely think that's my fault. I did it to this guy. He was certain I was going to wear a suit because I always wear a suit. And I'd actually been on like a podcast tour and I was kind of out of clean suits. Didn't feel like wearing a dirty one. I'm like, man, there's a good Carhartt flannel. I'll throw that on, put my cowboy boots on. I go in, he's in a 3-piece suit. I felt so guilty. I felt so guilty, man. And, but yeah, I genuinely just enjoy like dressing nice.
That's the best way to do it. What's a typical day look like for you now? Obviously, you have the construction company. You've started moving into online social media. I mean, I don't even know what else you got going on, but I know you have a lot going on. So what does a typical day look like?
Typical day. So generally, I control my bookends pretty well. So my mornings are mine. All my meetings are in the afternoon. All my outgoing communication of things that I need, that I want to get done, happen in the morning. So I'll normally wake up, go down, get in one of my trucks, take off driving, start making phone calls to the people I want to talk to. I like to move a lot, and I do that. And then there's times where I have Zoom calls, so it's set up for me just to sit still and talk. But I'm really just on the phone all day long, pushing projects down the line and talking to, because at this
point... Is it mostly still construction, or is it a mix?
No. So the construction company is pretty well handled. We have really good managers in place. We have bonus structures, all of those.
Awesome. Yeah,
the recruiting, the bidding, the scheduling, the hotels, the per diem, the payroll, everything. That business, soup to nuts, top to bottom. I don't work in it, and I'm probably going to teach guys how to do it soon.
I remember.
Once I get to where I want to be and understanding how it all works, making sure that the fulfillment is understood in a way that guys can be successful, because the information, I have it. It'll just be how I get it to them in a way to make sure that they can win, because I also understand that they are in chaos and overwhelm and getting buried in their business. And I can fix that, but I have to be very particular about how I make sure they get it. And honestly, that driving thing for me in the morning is probably because I used to wake up and drive to all my jobs every day. And it just stayed with me.
How early you get up? Is it pretty early?
Now?
Yeah.
Not super early, 7.
Okay.
But I'll tell you this, if I need to sleep later, I will. I do stay up late and study. That's where I do a lot of my studying of economics and geopolitics, is at night. I use it to like slow my mind down. I love geopolitical videos, like understanding how America cooed or who colonized who.
It's so interesting that you're interested in that to me.
Yeah, no, I love it. Why?
I don't know. It just...
So basically, Tanner thinks I'm a meathead.
No,
That
no, no.
wears nice suits. Yeah.
I for me,
What do you mean?
I
You're
get
curious about really interesting things.
no,
I'm so
no, no,
surprised.
no. So it's just interesting.
Tanner, this date's over, bro.
Yeah, for me, I get super interested in, like, I would say, personal development or like kind of like enlightenment thinking, or almost like why people think the way they think. Politics and stuff
Enlightenment?
don't. Yeah, like enlightenment, like
crystals,
enlightenment
like a girl? Are you gonna ask me what my sign is?
like Aristotle, or it could be Confucius, and I don't know. I get into that. Politics, not so much. I mean, I could see why you would get into that, but I guess I just didn't. That wouldn't be the thing I would guess.
But it's not politics for me. It's how is the world going to move, and how can I get in front of the advantages that are going to be there.
Okay.
And history does repeat itself. And so I like to watch things about why certain countries fell. That way I can really pay attention to, because you hear a lot of noise. Oh, the dollar's going to fall. Blah, blah. Yeah, okay. Well, let me go look at the last few countries that fell. Let me dig deep into their history and see what it was.
Okay.
You know, was it what happened to the Dutch, where they bet too much on their biggest, income stream? Or is it going to be like a situation where a war happens and the new winner takes all? Like, what's going to happen? And so for me, it's understanding all the ties that these countries have. So when I see that big scare tactic come out in the news or online, I can objectively make a decision to whether I think that's true or not with some data that I can trust because I looked for myself.
You always seem very thoughtful to me too, where it seems like you think a lot before you either form an opinion or maybe even sometimes before you say something, which I think is a good thing. But I find it very interesting because that's how it appears to me. Is you always seem very thoughtful about what you say and how you say it, which I think is a great skill.
What's really important to articulate your thoughts in the best possible way you can, and even consider that even sometimes using big words is something I try to avoid doing. Not so much because I can't look it up in a dictionary and put it into a sentence, but because if it doesn't translate or come across to someone that's taking it in and they have a word that they don't understand, then I could lose them in that point. And so to be very clear with my words, very direct with my words, and not overcomplicate them, I feel like more people can hear it. And isn't that the point in the first place?
Yeah, is there something that you did that helped you get better at speaking and forming thoughts and things of that nature? And is this recent, or has this been something you've been doing for a long time?
No, I mean, obviously I've not been on podcasts for a long time. I never did a whole lot of public speaking. I always seemed to find myself in a leadership role, either on a team or in a business or in a group. So maybe at some point in there, I did well, but I'll tell you something funny. I was very famous at recess in high school for freestyle rapping. It's about the time 8 Mile came out, so freestyling was kind of popular. And I used to tear people's ass up at recess in rap battles, and on the bus on the way to football games, and in the locker room. And so maybe in some way, I feel that doing podcasts is like, and especially for me, because of some of the podcasts that I go on, where they're going to come at me with a topic, maybe about NATO or something like that. It's like, close your eyes, reach in the bucket. They're going to pull out any subject from male and female dynamics to geopolitics, war and history, and you have to now rap on it. Go. By the way, don't screw it up, because it will be a negative clip. Right. Or it could be a banger.
Well, what do you get the most of? Is it usually men and female dynamics, or what are the questions you get the most?
It's somewhere between business and male and female dynamics.
Yeah. You obviously give a lot of advice to young men. What are some of the things you see them struggling with the absolute most?
One thing that I think is a narrative right now is that young men are weak. I actually don't think that's true. I think they're disenfranchised. I think they are a product of their environment. For example, you and I, if we were to come out of high school or go into the workforce in times like right now, where the house price had doubled or tripled in the last 4 or 5 years, and wages have not rose with those things. Maybe you and I would have enough gumption about us to go start an online business somehow. But for the average guy that just wants to work and maybe have a family, it's gotten so out of hand that those things that he might have been told were possible for him on his way up, like growing up, the things that he saw work for his parents will not work for him. And for that reason, I think he's probably angry. He's probably frustrated and upset and is looking for a solution in a world that seems to give a lot of opinions pretty freely, because any asshole with a camera can go on the internet and tell him what to do. And so I think it's hard for young men in the sense that they're more disenfranchised and they're all just a bunch of pussies. I don't really think that. I think that they're in a situation where the world did not turn out the way it was told to them it might. And for that reason, some of them are checking out, but then other young men are absolutely flourishing. You know, there's guys all the time, they're building online business. There's a lot of these agency kids that do quite well. Some kids are catching crypto pumps, and it's just it's a wild thing to see, the highs and lows of young men right now. One thing I like to tell them when they stop me, I tell them two things. The first thing I tell them is, dude, I love you. We're in this together. Believe me. And the reason why I tell them that is because of the second thing I tell them. It's like, you and I are no different. I'm just at a different place in my journey. I was you. And I think that's why I get so much fulfillment from doing it, is we're not really different from them. We just graduated high school in a certain year, had a certain set of opportunities in front of us, which we both followed, by the way. Because I argue that if me and you graduated high school in 2024 instead of when we did, we might have skipped college football.
Yeah.
That was the winning formula.
Yeah.
And so for them, the world has changed astronomically in the last just 10 years. But that 10 years, their zeitgeist of time of when they were born, they were believing that life was going to be a certain way, and then social media hits and explodes, and now we're dealing with AI and all these other things. The life that they thought that they could have might not even be a possibility anymore. And so it's going to, I think the next 10 years is going to be even more that way.
Something I've found for myself is with social media now, you know, sometimes if you get down in that doom scroll, you're just on your phone and you start going down, you know, you'll look up and you're like, why was I even doing that? There's so much information now that I think it can also be hard for them to know where to look, because
that's what I meant by any asshole with a camera.
Yeah. And it's
1,000%, man.
So what would your advice be to someone if they're trying to figure out who to listen to and not to listen to? Because I find it can be overwhelming. Even for me, with everything I know about business, I'll just see there's so much information everywhere. So how do you figure out who to listen to and not listen to?
I think what you first have to do is identify the life you want. First and foremost, look around you, look online, and say, who do I want to model my life after? Because if you just start off with, I want to make a bunch of money, well, you could go be a doctor, and that's decent money. However, you just sold your soul to that office 40 hours a week forever. And so in every category, whether it's money, business, fitness, whatever that thing is, go find the 5 to 10 people that have their life together in the category that you're thinking about across all those buckets of life, and follow those individuals because you want the life they have. Because funny enough, for example, if a young man wanted to learn how to make money online, he saw you and he saw this nice apartment with this beautiful view. He's like, man, I'd really like to be a content creator, making courses, teaching people how to better their lives in Miami. He might look at you, your apartment, your looks, your muscles, all this shit, right? And be like, I want to be like Tanner. And so I think finding the person that has the lifestyle that you want is the best place to start, because it's also the thing that's going to drive you to actually do the work that it takes to get there. There's got to be an emotional attachment of vision for these young men or women to see, to reach for, because I don't think money is going to do it. It might for a second, but it won't be sustainable.
How did you get your start into online business and social media? Because obviously you did the construction company, you're super successful with that. What was the thing that pivoted you into, I mean, basically what you do now?
Man, I always wanted to do it. When I was in my 20s, I wanted to do it. But I made a deal with myself that I would not do social media until I was a liquid multimillionaire. And I started a construction company, not a tech company. And it took me longer. And I was really disappointed with myself. When I got to 30 and I wasn't a multimillionaire yet, I was really upset about that. I was making a couple $100,000 a year. I was making really good money. It was a struggle. So I think it was like 32. I hit it. And so I made the decision. Then I had to get over the fact that people on my Facebook would probably judge me. And I always tell people if they have that issue of like worrying about what people think, is release the thought of what the people on your Facebook are going to say, because the people on YouTube and Instagram and all over the world, you'll find the people that love you for exactly who you are and who you want to become. And I think the dissonance right there is, even now, or particularly in the beginning, before we got really, really big on social media, when we were trying to push it that first year, I had some friendships that went away.
Because of your views?
It was more of because I come from the South. So it's very be humble, be seen, not heard. And I was learning how to market from Andrew. And if Customato teaches you how to box, you're going to box peekaboo. Well, if Andrew teaches you how to market, you're going to be coming with smoke. And I think over time, you become your own person, you get your own style, but you still have that base. I think it was more of, who the fuck do you think you are? A lot of those people saw me growing my company, and some of those people, not very many, but some of those people were at one point ahead of me in the relationship in business, and that had flipped. I have two people in mind. It really only happened with two people. And funny enough, one of them has actually completely come back around. One of those, I knew you'd get it all along type guys. And so you just be graceful, and do your best not to, dunk on them after the fact. But in the beginning, I think it's really important to be willing to sacrifice anybody that you think would judge you for it, so you can find the people all over the place that really love you for who you are. And I think that's probably the best advice I could give on starting social media.
What's your advice on how to network with people? As at least from my vantage point, you seem like you're very good at that, and it seems like you thrive in and you really like doing it. So what would your advice be to someone who, they want to network, they want to meet more people? What would you say to that?
Sometimes you have to pay money to get in a room in the beginning. Sometimes you have to fly out and meet people in person. One thing that I think this generation has as a disadvantage, and I believe every generation gets a new set of problems and new opportunities. This generation can touch the world on their cell phone, but they're not as good in person. And so I really like to take the advantage of, if I'm going to do a podcast, coming in person if possible, especially for the bigger ones, so I can actually build a friendship and rapport with the other individual. And generally what happens when I do that is they say, have you been on this podcast yet? You should do this guy. Have you heard of him? And in the back of my mind, I'm like, fuck yeah, I've heard of him. Like these things kind of happen. And so I think that networking in the traditional way is very powerful. And in the moment itself, I think one of the most important things you can do to network with somebody is to completely be there, asking them legitimate questions that legitimately interest you, and have them go deeper and deeper on those subjects. People love to talk about themselves. The trick and where I think people get messed up is they go down rabbit holes that are either obvious or they don't even have interest in. So their ability to actually be interested does not come across as genuine. So I like to ask people genuine questions
That you care about.
that I care about, so I can even stop them and say, wait. I heard that, but can you go back to that part and explain that to me? And just like really be there with them. And I think that that's really uncommon these days.
One of the reasons I wanted to start a podcast is exactly what you said. I
Yeah.
found that, you know, I don't know, I can't speak for you, but for me, I get so busy with business, right? And then by the time I look up, like there's no time left. And then I'm thinking, well, I don't want to spend all this time, like, you know, trying to convince a guy to go to lunch with me, et cetera. And then when I started doing the podcast, I found it was a lot easier and people seem to want to do it.
It's a win-win.
It's a win-win, right? Instead of just a take or an ask. And so I like that you said that, because that's actually, for me, that's been one of the best ways. I also think, to add to your point, if as you progress and you build something for yourself and a name for yourself and people look up to you, it's also easier because they want to get to know you versus you know, if it's a guy who like maybe has a very small following or he hasn't done anything, it's a little harder to get in the door because they're just like, yeah, you know, maybe I don't want to meet you.
But really what happens is when we first got started, we had some big breaks, but I think that's because I had built a real business in the real world.
No, I agree. Yeah.
And I got some legitimate respect from people with big platforms. It was very helpful. If I were starting today and I didn't have that advantage and the ability to move to Miami or fly all over the world, I would do small podcasts with people with the same size brand as me and slowly work my way up that chain until I got enough influence through doing those collabs that I was actually somebody that could have weight on a show or doing a podcast.
Is that the way that
That's the way I did it.
So that's, for anyone who's listening, if they're starting from zero, collaboration was one of the biggest things.
I believe
you did.
that collaboration is the number one growth hack.
Interesting.
In fact, I can even feel it on the streets. So if I go on a podcast tour tomorrow, like the one that I did last year was New Orleans, Miami, London, Spain, Dubai, LA,
That's crazy,
back to Miami. And it's like those podcasts hit like every 2 weeks like bombs. Mm-hmm. And so 6 weeks, let's say, after that, if I walk down the street in Miami, you're not going 10 feet without getting stopped for a photo because it's current.
So if they don't have that following, because for you at this point, I'm assuming you get asked quite a bit. So you don't.
Yeah, I get asked every day,
right?
multiple times.
You don't even have to look. So for those who are trying to come up, do you think it's better that let's say they create their own podcast where people are coming to them, or they're just reaching out specifically to people they want to collab with?
If I were a young man and I had not built a business yet, I would follow the Hard Knocks model.
Yeah.
And the reason I respect those young men so much is because instead of coming online and acting like they already have a business and they're balling, they went out and brought value to the people that follow them. And for that reason, I know they're getting paid. Mm-hmm. They're making really good money now. And so I think it's the honest thing to do. And I think that it's probably the best way to grow a channel right now if you don't have anything experience-wise and you just know you want to be in this business. So I really like the guys from Hard Knocks. They're good kids, man.
Yeah. Yeah, he's
or even that American Income model is really good. The street interviews that he does, I think they're great.
Speaking of interviews and podcasts, who are some of the coolest people you've met or interviewed with, and why? Like, what was so cool about them?
There's obvious ones like Andrew and T. Cameron Haynes is one of my favorite people I've met. I really enjoyed meeting Tucker Carlson.
Oh yeah,
when I met him at Andrew's house, I thought that was great. Podcast wise, I mean, obviously, I love Brandon Carter.
Of course,
you know,
he's hilarious.
Yeah, if you don't like Brandon Carter, fuck you. Who else? I mean, man, there's been so many good ones.
Yeah.
But Cam and Brandon stand out outside the very, very obvious ones. I'm sure there's more. I'm probably going to think of something on the way down the elevator. I'm like, I should have said that guy. Myron and Walt have been wonderful to me.
Fresh and fit, right?
Yeah. Yeah, they've been great to me. So a lot of, Tom Bilyeu, salt of the earth human being. Wonderful man. Tom Bilyeu is like the kind of guy that you would be lucky to be friends with. He's just that good of a guy. Very smart, very articulate. What I think that I vibe the most with Tom on is the fact that he's willing to look at the world and confront it for what it actually is with fact. And I think that's so rare. And he's strong enough to do it, and he's strong enough to push back and counter argue with you in a way that's very growth based. So I think Tom Bilyeu is just an absolute gem of a man. Really, really enjoy any time I get to spend with Tom.
I've said this a few times. In fact, sometimes when I'm saying this, you're the person I'm thinking of in my head. But I've said a few times, some of the people I respect the most, they just seem to have this confidence about them or this surety that the way they're living or what they're saying is the right way to do it. So the question for you is, you have that, and it comes off to me like you're very certain who you are and how you should be living. So how are you so certain about everything? And I also would say, how are you so certain when every time you seem to post something about your opinion, everyone's trying to tell you you're wrong? And at least maybe this is just me self-projecting. I find that whenever, I do feel certain something and then people are kind of attacking me and they're like, oh, maybe it shouldn't be that way, because I'm open-minded, sometimes I will start to doubt maybe. And I'm like, oh, maybe I am wrong. You seem the opposite. You seem very calm and collected, but whenever I talk to you, I think the thing I respect about you the most is you always seem to be pretty certain with how you view things. And so I'm curious, how does that come about? Like, how are you so certain about the way you feel and think?
So if I come out with an opinion and I'm very certain on it, you can bet your ass that I have studied the counter opinion. And I've considered it and I've taken it in and I've looked at it at every angle and looked for every blind spot of mine. So it's actually through the work of looking at the other angle, listening to the counter opinion, understanding I had a bias from the beginning, listening to anything I need to listen to support my bias, but then going and listening to the counter argument. And then from there, I take my life's experience and look objectively at the world and say, okay, this is how I feel about it. This is what I've read. This is what I feel. This is what I've experienced. This is what I have seen. And I take that and deliver the message in a way that is complete truth for me. And if I can't say it with conviction, then I might not say it at all. So that's how.
I think you told me you signed up for War Room a few years back, I want to say.
Yeah, 2019.
2019. What was the reason you signed up for that?
I was living in Louisiana, and I didn't see, I could not experience anybody that I believe saw the world the way I did. And so when I heard Andrew talk for the first time, I never forget, I was laughing and I punched my steering wheel on my Ford, and there's still a dent in it to this day. I still own this truck. And it was just because I was laughing because he was saying things out loud that I've been saying to people for years, and people were looking at me crazy. And it was very refreshing to me to know that there was at least one other human being out there, not only that felt the way I felt about these subjects, but was saying it very loudly. And I appreciated that. And so I joined the War Room. I bet it wasn't a week after I saw Andrew on Richard Cooper's podcast that I joined the War Room.
Yeah, something interesting to me is you've seemed to have a really just fast trajectory. You're well spoken, you're well liked, I would say. You've really kind of blown up. Did you think that was ever going to happen? Like where you'd be almost like a star pupil with them? Because obviously they've had probably 1 million students, and out of everyone, you seem to be the person that I recognize the most, that they've taken a liking to, I guess you could say. Did you ever think that was going to happen?
I never really thought about it like that. I didn't have an expectation so much. In short bursts, I saw opportunities and took advantage of them. When it comes to the boys particularly, one thing I'll say is that, I shook their hand, I looked them dead in the eye and had real conversations with them. And to some level, I think that helped. But then also, they taught more people than me, substantially more people than me, the same game. I think I was just most ready for it. That's what I tell young men all the time. It's like, you think you have time, you actually don't. Because you have to be working on yourself a decade at least before you even get the opportunity to step in front of the guy that can really change your life. And so if you're going to get put on by him, you damn better be ready. And that's fitness, money. You have to understand too, it's like when you meet somebody and they look at you and you've taken care of your fitness, and then they're like, hey, do you want to split a private jet and fly across the world? If you're not ready for it, then you're going to disqualify yourself from that group. And so I was confident in my ability because I waited and built out the person I was before I tried to come do this. And we're always growing and evolving, but I think there's a base level that should be there, particularly if you're going to give advice. And I was ready for that moment. And it showed up again and again and again. I got on these podcasts and it was just bars. And then we just kept pushing to grow it. And then we looked up one day and it was like, we really have done something here.
Yeah, I always find it interesting, your background, and then just how easily you've stepped into this, where
I was ready for it.
Yeah.
Completely.
Just most people be like, oh yeah, I started YouTube at 15 and I did this and your story
is less than 3 years.
Yeah, your story's so different, and
it's an outlier story too.
Yeah, and I think I admire it because it is so different, right?
Yeah.
And
there's a lot of stories behind it, and a lot of crazy days and nights and flights and.
Well, and on top of that, you've had. I mean, how long have you had a family now? Your kids are how old?
2. Emery, is 2, and Eva's 1.
So I guess somewhat recent.
Yeah.
I think even on top of that, just even with the construction company, the fact you stepped out, like it's different when you have one business and then you have a couple businesses.
Right.
I think even all the travel and stuff.
And even through that, we've bought over 450 doors in real estate.
I know.
In that time frame.
Yeah. I think it. Like, I would be curious to watch you for a week and just see how you operate with your time schedule, because I think you have a lot of demands on your life at this point, more than the average guy. And so I find that interesting as well, because you just seem so calm and collected all the time.
Yeah.
And I think it's probably not that easy, but it seems easy to you.
This is what I would tell you. If you can get through construction, this business, stress-wise, it's not comparable. So many problems that I face, losing YouTube, for example, bro, I've just been way farther down than that, with way more stress. And I think that doing real business in the real world with the big boys when I was young, it really prepped me, like an agagi, if you will, where there were times where I thought my career was over, I thought my life was over, I thought I'd lose my identity when my construction company was failing when I was younger. And I just grew to understand that that wasn't true. I always found a way through, and it gave me a calmness around anything that might come in this new career, in this life. And I'm very grateful for it. For a long time, I didn't understand why it was so difficult. And I think in the last 18 months, I'd say, it's very clear to me now why it was so difficult and why that was beneficial to me and who I had to become to be able to step into this and do it.
Kind of that silver lining.
Yeah, and you have to be very tough-skinned to do this. And you have to believe in yourself. And I think confidence is earned. And I earned that confidence in myself over time. And for that reason, unfazed completely.
Where does the confidence come from? Is it from being successful, or is it from just being, I guess, keeping the commitments you make to yourself, or doing things in a certain way?
Yeah, man, I trust myself. I've done a lot of these things before that I do. Now with social media, I just study it like I would study in those other businesses. I don't even think we've gotten started on social media, by the way. I wouldn't say that I really started paying attention to it a whole lot outside of doing the networking and the podcast until probably the last 3 months.
Well, and where are you the most active on? Because obviously YouTube's gone. And by the way, to this day, I've still never met anyone who got YouTube back. I don't know what it is about them. Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, you get it back. YouTube, for whatever reason, you can't.
I did get it back, and they took it down again.
Oh, so you did get it back.
I did get it back for about a month.
Like your Instagram, you don't post a ton. So I'm curious, like, where are you the most active? Is it Twitter?
You want to hear a really interesting stat on me?
Of course.
Go look up somebody you know that has 1 million subs and look how many posts they've made.
I know your posts are like, you've made like 3 posts, man. It's like nothing.
I don't know. It's like,
and when you do
maybe
post,
70
it's like an atom bomb. I've seen it.
Yeah, it's an interesting stat. And I told myself, I'm like, bro, you should post to Instagram more. I don't really get on Instagram a whole lot.
I know.
Like, people are like, did you see my post? Did you see my story?
Like,
and my response is, I'm an adult and I'm doing shit. Like, it's literally, they're like, did you see my story about this? I'm like, no. I didn't. In fact, I get angry because sometimes my hand slips and I'll watch somebody's story, and then the next thing you know, they're like screenshotting it and put it on their story.
That you saw
Like,
it.
circle it. I'm like, fuck. I'll call and yell at Thomas because he's like the one person that can be in my inbox. I'm like, did you watch somebody's story on my profile? Because I'll see it and they'll tag me. Jay Waller's watching my stories. And I'm like, fuck. Some fucking somebody I met like 5 years ago or on act, whatever. But no, I don't know, man. I wish I had that muscle where like I crave the attention of the likes. That would be really dope because I think I'd post more. Yeah.
But where does the content go? Or is it mostly the collaborations you're doing? Like, because you do shoot a lot of content. So
It's a collabs.
it's a collabs.
Collabs is the way. Because you understand, it's like when we do this podcast today, right? I could have set up a camera at my house and done this, but they're going to hear you ask me the question. So I get all the content I would have gotten if I just sat at home and did scripted content. But then also some percentage of your following will end up following me.
Right.
And let's say that's 30%. And you have a lot of followers. So how many times do I need to do that until my stuff is everywhere?
Yeah, I think that's the best tip you gave today. It's so simple, but it makes sense, right? Like, it's just do more collaborations was like the easiest thing I think you said, but
Do more collabs and try to do them in person.
yeah.
Because if you do them in person.
Yeah, versus like Zoom.
Now, don't get me wrong. I think I might actually start doing Zooms, but it's going to be for the smaller channels that I'm not going to fly to, or I don't put in my opportunity stack. So we keep a spreadsheet by city. So when I go to Vegas, I know I have this podcast, this podcast.
Oh,
this.
so you go back to them?
Well, I'll either do my second round or I'll post a story while I'm there very intentfully. And when the invite comes in, I put it on the spreadsheet.
It's so interesting, man. Because sometimes I will drive myself crazy, like trying to come up with reels and content, and it almost seems you're the opposite, where you're not trying to come up with anything.
Flow like water, man.
Yeah. And it's a lot easier too because you don't necessarily have to prep, right? Like you just show up.
I don't prep at all.
Yeah, you're who you are. You answer the question.
Right.
That's probably the best little piece.
But it
of
could be a
advice you
personality type thing. My friend Sterling Cooper, he's a lot like you. He's very organized and very. I'm really good. He told me this one time. I've never told this story. We're in Medellin, and there are some guys in the war room. We're doing an event, and 3 or 4 of them forgot their passport. And I was able to like pull together the management for the private jet and the airport and like get photos sent over, call back to the house, send me go through his bag. We're FaceTiming. I get these dudes on this jet. And I get back, and Sterling was a part of that whole process. He goes, mate, I've never seen anybody so good in chaos. And for me, I don't mind that. Whereas maybe for you, it makes you anxious because you don't have it perfectly prepped. Sterling is that way. But if you understand yourself in that way, then you can step back and build everything around yourself that makes it all go together. Like me and you, if you and I did a business together, we'd be really good because I'd go stir up a bunch of shit and kill a bunch of deer, let's say, but you would make sure it didn't rot.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? And you have to have all those different parts, and you have to understand which one of those you are. I think one of the most important parts about being successful is like deeply and objectively understanding yourself and not trying to get yourself, like a lot of people try to change themselves. They're holding their breath in life. I need to be more like this guy. Why don't you just find a way that inspires you to do the thing to get that result, or hire it out, or create a system that works for you so you're not holding your breath all the time and you can get all of the energy and the things that you have of value to the world inside the framework of what works for you, because consistency is the number one thing that is going to get you results. So solve for yourself and what it will take for you to be consistent. If you can solve for that and objectively look at your strengths and your talents and objectively make your decisions based off that hand you're dealt and how you are, what you have energy to do, you'll be substantially more successful than the person that is always trying to change.
You've shifted my perspective a little bit too, because with my businesses, I'm always so busy. So sometimes, well, I know I do. People, if they do ask me to do a podcast or a collab, I usually say no because I'm too busy. And you're kind of doing the opposite. And I think that's very interesting. And that's also why I enjoy these conversations, because it kind of challenges me to think differently sometimes. You talked a lot about, I think you dropped great game for the listeners for growing their social media collaborations. That I thought that was brilliant. What are some of the habits or practices that you found the most helpful for personal or professional growth, whether that be going to the gym or reading or whatever? Like, what are some core things you've done that maybe someone could pick up that you think could help them progress?
I've always said that going to the gym is the most important thing. I'll never get off of that. It does so many things for you personally. And it's one of the only things that you can have as a habit that you get to take with you everywhere you go. You could be the richest guy in the room. Nobody will know. You could be the best violin player on the planet. Nobody would know unless you had a violin in your hand. And where's the opportunity to actually show those two things? You could show it in ways, but fitness, it's objectively there right in front of you, clear as day, and you get to take it with you everywhere you go, and people think you're smarter. They see that you have discipline. You're more attractive, which gets you more deals in business. Aesthetics matter. It's one of the highest return on investments possible. So fitness, right now for me, it's physical therapy. I haven't worked out in 5 months. But
Really?
yeah, 5 months.
That's crazy, bro.
Yeah, the rehab, it's an 8-month project.
You're that big still.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah, but I never took any steroids. Like, it's just mature muscle. And that's one thing I used to tell myself when I was younger. It's like, I would say whatever my pump is today will be me regular tomorrow. And then if I get to point, like the peak of what I want to look like, I always have it. And that might not be true because of muscle atrophy or age or whatever, right? But to believe it and then to keep a very tight rope on how far you'll get away from it does make it substantially easier to keep. It's easier to keep it, I think, than to get there. To get there, you have to have this very forced effort to get especially if you're trying to put on muscle. But to keep it, if you have very tight expectations of what you're going to look like, I think is easier, because you've built a good base and you've built good dietary habits. It's normal. Like I fast every day, right? It's not hard for me to eat tonight and then just go to bed. Is that the best way? No, but I know myself and I know that's what I'll do consistently. So if it's 80% as good as the guy that says to eat at 6 o'clock, stand up on your head and drink raw eggs, well, then I'll take that.
Thanks so much for coming on the show and dropping all that knowledge and gems that you've obviously accrued over the years. If people want to find out more about you or work with you, where's the best place for them to go?
Yeah, send me a message on Instagram. It's Justin Win Waller 7, JUSTIN WIN Waller WALLER 7. We also have a daily newsletter where we send out a lot of lessons I've learned, either the easy way or the hard way. And I enjoy sharing those daily on the newsletter. So find me there.
Awesome, man. Thanks for being on the show.
Bro, I'll shake your hand, but
Oh, I forgot.